My name is Janan Bunge, and I am the Vice President Principal Analyst at Forrester, leading our security and risk research here in the Asia Pacific region. I also globally lead our research on awareness, behavior, culture, and a number of other things. But today I'm going to be talking about zero trust. And for my purposes, so that I know where to start, can I get a show of hands of who here has heard of zero trust? Okay, that's good. That's most of you. Anybody implemented or is in the process of implementing zero trust? Oof. Okay, maybe 1 or 2%. No worries. Well, that's what I'm here for. So one of my key research projects, I've been in cybersecurity, by the way, for the last 20 plus years. So this is a topic that I feel very passionately about. With zero trust, I only started getting into it about 3 years ago. As some of you might know, zero trust was a term that was coined by Forrester in 2009. It was not something that we were used to here in Australia or in all of Asia Pacific, actually. So 3 years ago, part of my job was to bring it here to the region. And to do that, I interviewed a whole bunch of security leaders, a whole bunch of IT leaders to understand, well, what's the adoption of zero trust like here? So we did that 3 years ago. We wrote the research on the state of zero trust adoption, and I am in the process of refreshing that research now. So my job today is to share with you my findings over the past few years of the state of adoption. And what I also want to do, one of the things that's coming out of my current research interviews is that everybody is confused about what zero trust is. What is the definition of zero trust specifically? Where do we start? So I am going to be sharing some of that with you. But before I do that, I want to go to something a little bit more entertaining. I know Rajesh showed a prediction from Gartner, and at Forrester, we love our predictions, and we especially love it when one of our predictions come true. So one of the predictions I made in 2020 was that we expected that at least one government in Asia Pacific, which for us at Forrester includes ANZ, is going to embrace a zero trust cybersecurity framework. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to let you know whether or not that prediction has come true. But why did we make that prediction? Why did we make such a bold prediction when really 2 years ago, not many people were talking about zero trust? If I'd asked this question of who's heard of zero trust 3 years ago, I reckon we would have about 30% of the audience put their hands up. We made that prediction because since 2009, in the US in particular, large technology companies and federal government have really gone on a rampage to adopt zero trust. In Europe, it was like us, it was a little bit slower. But around 2020 in Europe, my colleague Paul Mackay did his inaugural research and found that zero trust back then was moving from concept to reality. Then, of course, in 2021, President Biden issued his executive order for zero trust adoption, where he required all federal governments, departments in the US to adopt zero trust, and NIST released their zero trust architecture framework. So a lot happened, but still for us in ANZ, it was all a little bit slow. So what's the holdup? What's happened with zero trust? A little bit of history, a little bit of timeline. I'm not sure if you can see the entirety of this. It was Jericho Forum way back in 2009, really well ahead of their time, well ahead of this future of work, remote working, digital first, remote first. They started introducing the concept of perimeterless security. My colleague John Gindervark introduced the term zero trust back in 2009. And it was tied to a set of concepts that are tied very much to network security. And it was all about stopping trusting packets as if they were people. So it's very network security based. And then, of course, we have got Beyond Corp, which was debuted by Google in 2014. And the vendors loved all of this. They loved zero trust, particularly the network vendors, and they just went ahead with everybody creating their own definition and confusing everybody in the market about what zero trust is and what zero trust isn't. Fast forward to today, my colleagues Jess Byrne, David Holmes, and others who really specialize deeply in zero trust actually wrote the research which has the definition of zero trust. You will be getting a copy of this presentation, as was mentioned earlier, so don't worry about taking it down. But effectively, it is an information security model that denies access to applications and data by default. There are 3 principles that are foundational to zero trust. All entities, whether they are users, whether they are workloads, whether they're applications, they are untrusted by default. Least privilege access is enforced on all of those, and comprehensive security monitoring is implemented. Another principle-related definition that we created in 2017, which I personally really appreciate, is founded on the principles that with zero trust, there is this principle that is never trust, always verify. The data becomes at the center of everything. We are protecting data first and foremost, regardless, again, whether it's sitting on workloads, with people, networks, devices. It is all about the data. We strictly enforce access control, and we are constantly verifying device health. Now, let's talk about adoption. And that is actually one of the most common questions that I get asked. Just even coming in this morning, I had a few people ask me, well, what is happening in Australia? This is the actual data. When we asked our security decision makers, what are your top strategic priorities? You can see that implementing a zero trust security strategy is right at the bottom there. We seem to have, in terms of security, much more pressing things in the region. This is quite unique to us here in the region. We see this data being higher in regions such as the US. So what is happening here? What has slowed down adoption? Again, I'm gonna hone in on this because I think it's important, and I think it's important also that we bust through that. So one of the things that I regularly get told by my clients everywhere in the region is that the terminology for us here is quite jarring, particularly the word zero that comes before zero trust. I know a lot of organizations here, and I'm sure yours is no different, is talking about customer trust and the importance of trust. And certainly we've got research at Forrester about the trust imperative, which shows the significance and importance of trust to consumers. So when you start using words such as zero trust, organizations and people and stakeholders and boards get a little bit confused. Well, what do you mean? Are we not trusting people all of a sudden? Our culture is founded on trust. So that is certainly something that we work with our clients on, and how to position zero trust as an architectural framework. It's got nothing to do with not trusting people, not trusting employees. The other objection that we get quite a lot is that because zero trust is still relatively new, we have not got many adopters, many pioneers in the region who are doing zero trust. And indeed, when I asked the question, how many people have implemented or in the process of implementing zero trust, I think we had 2 or 3 hands go up. And we are operating in a region where we do look at our colleagues, at our friends, at other organizations to see who has conducted their implementation in order for us to learn from. So this is something that we hear quite a lot also. There are a couple of other dynamics that are occurring as well. Lack of visibility and influence. It's really interesting. Again, I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years. And it's from a board level perspective, cybersecurity has never had so much attention. I have interviewed board members who have told me that they believe that cybersecurity is an existential threat to their organization. It is the most important priority. And that's wonderful, and it's all well and good. I'm not really sure that all of that attention is accompanied by the budgets that security teams need in our region, although it is certainly getting there. We've discussed workplace cultures founded on trust and the paucity of zero trust pioneers in the region. The other thing that's quite related to the lack of visibility and influence and budget is that our security teams actually are still quite small. And when you do think about zero trust, we will get into some of the detail later. It is not a small program of work. It's not just one product that you can buy, set and forget. It is actually a transformation. It is a program of work that's going to require some budget. And last but not least, and I hear this all the time, I heard it in my research 3 years ago, since and in my current research interviews, vendors pretending to be zero trust bullets, silver bullets, and experts, which is certainly not the case. And I'm really delighted to, when I speak to the vendor community, they are just as keen to change their messaging and their marketing around zero trust as we are to avoid that confusion it's caused for everybody. Now, one of the really interesting things actually is how organizations here are implementing zero trust. This is something that has been coming up consistently for me over the last 3 years. One of the things that I've learned is that a lot of organizations are actually implementing zero trust without necessarily calling it zero trust. So they've got elements of identity and access management, elements of micro-segmentation, authorization, authentication, all the other bits and pieces that we would traditionally define as zero trust, but they are not yet calling it that. They are not yet calling it that, sometimes because of the terminology and sometimes because they simply just haven't got the time or the resources to go at this in a big bang approach. So there is a little bit of small steps, one step at a time that's happening. A couple of other things that are really interesting for me to see in terms of implementation. Over the last probably 1.5 years especially, it's been absolutely thrilling to see a lot of my clients using zero trust as an opportunity for the security teams to collaborate with their IT and with their technology and with their business counterparts. So there have been a lot of workshops a lot of alignment workshops. I have seen zero trust centers of excellence spring up where everybody in the organization is coming together to define and understand what zero trust is. We also see a lot of our clients that see zero trust as actually an opportunity, like all technology transformations, to rationalize their security investments and to do this strategically, to have a look at their control landscape. What's happening? Do they have redundancies in tools, in processes, and to fix that? And on the point of vendors, we are seeing a lot more of our clients as well starting to work with vendors to help them build the zero trust architecture. So a lot of progress. And it's really good because I think that dynamic of zero trust is slowly but surely gaining adoption. I'd love to see that changing, and it has to change, and it is actually changing. The dynamics that are forcing it to change are, I guess, 3 or 4-fold. Rajesh, that video that he had, to put it very beautifully, we're no longer employees sitting there in that middle part of this on enterprise computers on premise. Everything's changing. Everything's moving to the outer edge of that model. And that means, of course, that the threat vector is moving to the outer edge of the model. The threat landscape is changing, has changed, continues to change quite significantly, and the way that we do work is changing. There is across the world, across Asia Pacific, in Australia, There is an evolution in the regulatory landscape, which is, of course, driving more and more organizations to adopt cybersecurity. And the other dynamic that is occurring that I don't hear many people talking about is that individuals, customers, and citizens are now actually demanding data privacy and confidentiality. I find this chart really interesting. Data privacy and confidentiality is the number 2 driver for consumers in Australia. It's number 1 in China, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and number 3 in India. When we're talking about drivers for consumers, we're talking about things such as giving back to the local community. We're talking about things such as the environment, such as climate change, such as gender equity. So when we start thinking that consumers are actually demanding things for us, I think this is going to drive more and more adoption of cybersecurity. The other point that I wanted to mention that is really important, Rajesh alluded to it in his keynote earlier. A lot of the time when we talk about zero trust, we talk about it and its data protection benefits. And of course, they are very important. So when I see my clients putting forward their business case, they do focus largely on data protection. But the other benefit of zero trust is, of course, it helps increase productivity for employers through the elimination of cumbersome passwords, for example, replacement on VPNs, and that consolidation of performance-draining security agents on endpoints and so on. And this is really important because one of the things that we know is that people, humans, the people that we serve, whether they're employees, whether they're consumers, they want to bypass the security policies because they usually stop them from doing their job. And that's not ideal. That's a whole other topic that we can talk about another time. Now, one of the things, and I know myself when I started delving into zero trust and trying to understand what it means, and when my clients have spoken to me about it, is, it's too big, it's too confusing. You know, we've got the definition, we've got a couple of frameworks, NIST has one, Forrester has, of course, got a whole series of articles on this. But at a very practical level, I really appreciated this, which one of my colleagues created, defining what zero trust actually is, and to give a level of assurance that actually with zero trust, it is simply a set of security controls. You might have a lot of these controls already, so you don't actually need to start from scratch. And that gives a lot of comfort to a lot of people. There might be a few controls that you might need to revisit or to do differently, but the point of showing you this is to break it down into the 7 different elements of zero trust and the different controls which that might entail. The other big question that we get, of course, is, well, where do we start? And you can actually be really methodical about your zero trust implementations. You do your maturity. If any of you have been involved in any security programs, it's a really great place to start. Understand what is your maturity? What is your actual risk? What's your business asking of you? What security capabilities do you have already? Again, you might have a lot of this stuff already, so you don't need to start from scratch. Set your desired security maturity and get started. For those of you who want to get into a little bit more detail, this is actually not yet published research. I think you might be the first audience who is seeing this. It's why it's got a big draft sticker on it. It is a maturity model that helps define how you go from zero trust light all the way to optimal zero trust. So a really great way to measure your maturity for identity, device, network, workload, data. We've already got a few clients that have started using this to help them measure their maturity, know where to start, and really, you know, continue this demystification of what this zero trust is. As I get near the end of all of this, so my background, again, it's not security architecture. I've led security teams. I've led significant cybersecurity transformations. And one of the things that I know from my own experience and from my clients' experience is that the thing with zero trust, just like anything with security, bad technology choices or products are not always the reason why security initiatives fail. In fact, there rarely are. Security initiatives and zero trust particularly fails because there is a lack of understanding of what the business actually needs, and it is really, really difficult sometimes to sell security to the business. So just wanted to put that up on the table. It's really important, like all transformations, to prioritize cultural and change management excellence if you do choose to go down the path of zero trust. Now, I want to go back to our prediction. And I mentioned that we do love winning a prediction at Forrester. When we wrote the prediction, we had hoped that this would be Australia who would have adopted zero trust, but actually it turned out to be Singapore, of all places. So in October, in 2021, the Prime Minister of Singapore actually announced the Singaporean cybersecurity strategy, and zero trust was foundational to that strategy. They clearly defined what zero trust is. They required a mindset shift from perimeter defense towards a zero trust model, and encourages all critical infrastructure organizations to adopt zero trust security model. So with that, really hoping to see what zero trust or what Australia holds for zero trust over the next 12 months or so. I've not seen any movements within government to adopt zero trust. I think we've got the Essential 8. There's significant overlap between the Essential 8 and our zero trust framework. But other than that, remains to be seen. Thank you.